Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Aisha, your host. The Ontario sex ed curriculum continues to cause controversy within our communities. Let's get the Islamic perspective by talking with Dr. Shabir Ally. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shabir.
Pleasure to be on.
So we're talking about sex ed, which is quite a controversial and hot topic in the Muslim community as well as mainstream. But we're going to explore it from the Muslim lens. Now, what I've noticed is that whenever there's anything with the word sex in it, it seems to be like a taboo topic within the Muslim community. Do you think this should be the case?
No, because on the whole, our religion does not see sex as a bad thing. Of course, it needs to be done within the halal avenue of marriage. But on the whole, it's not like, we have a philosophy that says that sex is a bad thing. And this is in contradistinction to some other views that think that, okay, somehow like a sinfulness of humankind is being transmitted through the sexual act onto the children. So we don't have that concept. Each child is born pure, and it is only their sins after maturity that really count against them. And either their good deeds would lead to their eventual success in the life hereafter, or their bad deeds would lead to their eventual downfall unless God has mercy on them and forgives them.
Now, because we're talking about sex ed, is there anything in the Quran that talks about teaching children and I guess young adults about mature subjects and how we should approach it?
There are some indications in the Quran about how to deal with children on this topic. First of all, we should say that the Quran deals with all aspects of life, deals with private, social, family life, and all of this. So naturally, the Quran speaks about birth, and as it does about death, unfortunately, which is an unfortunate part of human existence, but the Quran covers that as well. But when it comes to deal with the subject of birth and birthing and so on, the Quran has many references. And the Quran is a short book, about 4/5 the size of the New Testament. Many children memorize the Quran. In fact, some people may find it surprising that you have a 10-year-old Muslim child who has memorized the entire Quran. Now, most Muslims do not know the Arabic language, so some children would memorize the entire Quran without knowing the actual Arabic language. So they would read the words perfectly, but they wouldn't know what it means. But some such children are also in the Arab world. They understand the Arabic language. They're reading the Quran. Even without memorizing the Quran, they're reading it every day in their schools and evening and weekend schools and all of that. And they would know all of these subjects that are being discussed in the Quran. So the Quran says, yes, alunaka anil mahid. They ask you about menstruation, and then the answer is given. The Quran speaks about the human situation. The male covers the female, and then she conceives a light load which she's able to walk around with. And then it comes time for her to give birth. So all of this is mentioned in the Quran in detail. The Quran speaks about how God creates human beings in stages, and then ثُمَّ السَّبِيلَ يَسَّرَ, then God has made easy for this person the passage. Now this is not very detailed. One would have to go to the commentaries to realize that this is talking about the birthing process, the child going through a safe passage that is made possible by God. If we think of the baby being locked in there in the womb, and then eventually God makes it possible for this baby to come out safely. So things like this are sometimes mentioned in a subtle way, but often very explicitly in the Quran without being so graphic as to be lewd. The Quran is mentioning what needs to be mentioned for clarity without hiding the facts, and at the same time not going overboard with this to unduly arouse sexual desires. And that, in a nutshell, gives us some guidance on how to deal with the subject. We answer questions from the children as they arise. They may read the Quran. They may have a question about this. Okay, so this question is mentioned in the Quran. Tell me more about this. Okay, the story of Joseph is mentioned in the Quran about the Potiphar's wife who tried to seduce Joseph. In the Quran, Potiphar is not mentioned, but this is given as the wife of the Aziz, of the ruler of Egypt. She tried to seduce him. She bolted the door, and he ran for the door. She grabbed his shirt from behind. The shirt tore. but then she accused him when witnesses were brought to the scene. And one of her own people said, check his shirt. If the shirt is torn from the back, she's the one who attacked him. But if the shirt is torn from the front, then obviously he was coming on to her. And they verified that the shirt was torn from the back. Now this story gives a clear indication of how things can happen and develop between people. In this case, it's a female coming on to the man. Oftentimes, it's a man trying to press himself onto a female. But all of this now gives rise to questions, and we should answer the questions of children according to their level of curiosity and their capacity to absorb the information, but also at the level of need. We should recognize the needs before they arise and educate children about what they need to know before they find themselves in situations that are difficult for them to deal with, or that can land them into more problems unless they had the relevant information on hand previously.
So let's talk about the sex ed curriculum itself. Obviously there's controversy with the new one being released and then revoked back. Concerns from the Muslim community about, well, should kids really learn these kinds of things at such a young age? So from your perspective, and looking at this not from the controversy, but from an Islamic perspective, is there an age that's considered appropriate to talk to kids about some of these mature conversations, whether it be puberty, whether it be, whatever the case may be?
In the mid-1990s, when a new curriculum was being introduced at that time, I joined together with some Christian friends that I was talking to and having dialogue with at the time to denounce the efforts to revise the curriculum at that time. And then the new curriculum was introduced, and it lasted with us for many years. And now people are saying, let's oppose this 2015 one. But the question is, what do you want to go back to? You want to go back to that same one which I opposed in the first
I'm very surprised
place.
that you did that.
well, obviously, with time we mature, we get more knowledge, we see more broadly, and we realize that not all influences are good ones. We have to see things for ourselves and see things from within the perspective of our own religious tradition. Sometimes it's good to combine forces with other people of other faiths, and we have to see what is the extent to which our own religious tradition coincides with the needs and expectations of people of other traditions. So we should have some independent judgment on this, and judging things from within the perspective of my own religion and seeing the way in which life has developed in Canada over the years. And now I've come to realize that youth are being exposed to things on the internet at a far younger age than ever before. There was a newspaper article in the Metro newspaper of Toronto showing that kids of a very young age are texting each other, and they have code words to use when they text to each other. And some of the things are surprising. So POS means parent over shoulder. Or just P for short means parent. Parent is around, so we're not going to talk about certain things. And then PP means the parent is gone, so it's P, but P cancels the P, something like this.
Interesting.
Yes, and then KPC means like keeping parent clueless, and so on. So kids are talking to each other, and they're getting into subjects which parents would be shocked to find out about, that their kids are involved in these conversations. And the kids have developed ways to exclude the parents. And the fact that they have developed these code words means that they have been doing this a lot, because you don't develop the code word from the start.
Yeah.
First you do something with the long way around, and then you find a shorter way eventually when the long way becomes too tedious and too repetitive. So you find a short way, like you would say K for okay in your texting, right?
That's true.
And I would go the long way, O-K-A-Y, right? Because I'm old school. But the kids have developed these ways of communicating with each other, and they'll be telling each other, take your pants off, or I am naked on camera, or something like this. All again with code words, which means that they have done it a lot of times till they have now come to the stage of using just simply the codes.
So it is, so your opinion is we need to have these, at what age do you think then we should start having these conversations?
So I don't have clear answers to this, but in the Islamic tradition, we have some indications that there is a hadith that says that when the children are 10 years old, you separate their beds. And commentators think that this means that when they're that age, the possibility of sexual stimulation is real, and so they should sleep each in their separate beds. One commentator said even if they're two girls together, but they should sleep in separate beds, not in the same bed. Or if circumstances are such that then they should at least be under their own covers. They shouldn't share the same cover, and so on. That shows that we have to start at a very early age to let children know what are limits. The Quran says that there are children who are prepubescent and then post-pubescent. Now, prepubescent children should ask permission to enter their parents' room at three times within the 24 hours. Qabla Salat al-Fajr, before the early morning prayer, and Wabada Salat al-Isha, which is after the night prayer. That's also obviously be dealing with the night here, but also importantly, Hina Dhahira, at the heat of the day, when the people normally would take off, they would take a nap and maybe take off some of their clothing due to the heat of the day. So these three times of day, the children who are below puberty are required to ask permission before getting into the room. And then the older children, those who are post-pubescent, would need permission at any time. So what's the difference? It's possible that even outside of these three times when people might normally be taking a nap or going to sleep, parents could be in some situation of closeness that would not be appropriate for the older children to see at that time. Younger children, maybe this will pass unnoticed, but the older children will notice this semi-intimate behavior or romantic setting. And some of that is healthy to be observed, like children need to see their parents in a healthy romantic relationship, true. But if it gets to closeness, caressing and touching and kissing in a passionate way, then obviously this would be inappropriate to be witnessed, because that would just stimulate the youth to their own desires, and they would want to go out and do something similar as well with someone they would find. So we can see that different ages are treated differently in the Quranic text itself and in the prescriptions given there.
So I think that's very helpful. Now I want to ask one question that I think within the Muslim community I've heard a lot with the possibility of the new curriculum. Is it necessary for Muslim kids to learn about things like consent or learn about things like learning to say no? Because if Islam is a religion where we believe and we teach our kids about abstinence, then why is it that they need to learn these things? How would you respond to that?
Well, definitely they need to learn these things. The absence of this as a teaching more generally in society has led to many problems, and these problems affect Muslim youth as well. Many years ago, there was a story that broke out of a school in North York, in the greater Toronto area, where it was found that a particular Muslim girl was being abused by several boys. And it came to light that the boys were deliberately targeting Muslim girls because they had the idea that Muslim girls will not talk about this. Later on.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so it's affecting people. People need to, children need to know the names of body parts so that if they are hurt by somebody else, they can say specifically what was done to them, where it was done. Because if they say something vague like, he touched me down there, then sometimes authorities can just shrug it off as down there could mean almost anything. Maybe it was not that intimate. They interpret with a sugar coating on it, and so they do not need to treat the problem. They can just brush it off. But if it is very specific, then of course we need to deal with it.
So where do you, I think you've addressed some very important topics, but where do you, as a parent who's maybe watching the show, where do you draw the balance, or strike a balance rather, where you're not telling your children everything, but you're telling them some things that you think are necessary? How do you figure that out?
Well, it's good to leave this to the educators and the experts in the field. Now, expert psychologists and so on who are operating outside of the Muslim framework will not say everything that is pleasing to us. They're working without the idea of God, without the idea of a moral compass that guides us within our faith. They may have their own moral compass, but not ours. They do not have our restrictions and regulations and so on in mind. But we need to benefit from all of their studies, all of their research, all of their know-how in how they're going to guide the society in general. But we need to add our own input in this, and that's where parenting at home comes in handy. We need to sit down with our children. We need to be armed with that curriculum, the all 200 and some pages of it. We need to read it thoroughly, know what the children are learning in school, and then we need to discuss those same items with them at home from within an Islamic context. And we need to leave shyness behind. A hadith even praises Muslims who are not shy enough who would not let shyness prevent them from seeking the knowledge that they need of their religion. So the children need to know certain things, and we need to sit them down in an Islamic context and debrief them on some of the things that they have learned. Some of it is good, and some of it is not so good. We need to help them to differentiate between the two. We need to give them that Islamic guidance as a sort of icing on the existing cake of what they have brought home with them from school.
Well, I guess at the time of this interview, it's still up in the air what curriculum is going to make it back to school, but whichever one that is, I think that's very helpful advice. So thank you very much, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.